Letitia James had worn the cross into rooms far more hostile than this. Press pits in Manhattan, deposition chambers packed with billion-dollar egos, even church basements where betrayal came with applause. But the moment she stepped into the D.C. local courthouse that afternoon, something in the air warned her. This wasn't just a courtroom. It was a setup. The call had come exactly 29 minutes earlier. Letitia. Trump's voice boomed through her DOJ line, clipped an urgent D.C. court. Religious case. Christians banned from praying in public. I want eyes in that room. Yours. Handle it. Then silence. No briefing, no backup. Just Trump's voice, and now her presence. She moved fast. Navy blazer, crisp white shirt, plain black pants, but the silver cross stayed on her collar. Not for show, for spine. By 2:51 p.m., she was through security, past the crowd, and into the courtroom. A stuffy, windowless box with the soul of a DMV and the decor of an airport terminal. The benches creaked. The clerks clattered. A man in a wrinkled t-shirt reading "I am king" scrolled his phone with greasy fingers. A woman across the aisle adjusted a necklace the size of a doorknob. Dress code clearly optional, except, apparently, for her. Letitia took the middle row, opened her DOJ-issued tablet, and started noting everything. Trump wanted receipts. She'd give him a ledger. At 2:59, the back door groaned open. Judge Charles Hargrove entered like he owned not just the court, but the concept of judgment itself. Black robe ironed to military sharpness, wire-rimmed glasses perched with surgical intent, hair combed like a Cold War general. "All rise," barked James Wilson, the longtime bailiff. Everyone stood. Letitia, too, gaze steady, heels silent. Hargrove's tone sliced through the tension. "This is a courtroom, not a stage for personal expression," he declared, scanning faces with sterile disdain. Then he saw her and paused. His voice dropped an octave. "Miss," he said coldly, "that cross. Remove it." Letitia didn't blink. "Excuse me." "You heard me. The courtroom is a neutral zone, no symbols of belief." Her answer came calm, clear, and grounded. "I'm here as a legal observer for the executive branch. This is a personal item, protected under the First Amendment. Unless there's a posted rule banning it, I suggest we proceed." Hargrove's lips curled slightly, the smirk of a man unused to being challenged. "You think the Constitution overrides decorum?" Letitia met him beat for beat. "Number, I think it overrides intimidation." And just like that, the cross stayed on, and the fuse was lit. Letitia James didn't flinch. She had faced down crooked developers, Wall Street attorneys with seven-figure teeth, and an entire political machine built to out-talk her. But this absurd theater of judicial vanity, was something else entirely. Judge Hargrove, gripping that gavel like it doubled as a weapon and a mirror, pounded it again with the zeal of a man who truly believed sound equaled law. "The courtroom is neutral, not a church," he barked, for the second time, as if saying it louder might turn it into constitutional text. James Wilson, the bailiff, tilted his head like a man watching a train derail in slow motion, except this train wore a black robe and was visibly allergic to the First Amendment. Mrs. Thompson, the court clerk, paused her typing, bun tightened like her lips, eyes darting toward Letitia, curious and just a little bit concerned. And in case irony needed an alibi, there sat the man in the "I am king" t-shirt and the walking jewelry box of a woman beside him, both glittering freely, untouched, unnoticed. Letitia stood her ground. Not a word, not a blink, but her silence was deliberate, coiled. She wasn't being targeted as a person. She was being targeted as a principle. The cross on her collar wasn't fashion. It was friction to a man who couldn't tolerate anything he couldn't control. "I have the right to wear it under the First Amendment," she said, calm as steel, voice like a sharpened edge. Hargrove cut her off instantly, like any autocrat whose ego gets chafed by a clause from the Bill of Rights. "Don't lecture me on the law. Step up to the bench, now." The room froze. The air got thick. Even the fluorescent lights dimmed in shame. Letitia's heels clicked deliberately across the floor like punctuation marks in a legal brief. She stepped up, her cross catching the overhead glare, casting a beam that, for a split second, made Hargrove look like the villain in a Broadway flop about secular extremism. "So, what are you doing here with that thing, miss?" he sneered, narrowing his eyes like a man about to quote from a code of ethics he hadn't read since the Clinton administration. "I'm here on duty," Letitia replied, tone flat but charged. Her thumb, ever so casually, toggled her phone's record button. "And I have the right to wear it." The gavel cracked down again like a tantrum in oak. "People like you think faith means you can walk into any space and disrupt it," Hargrove growled, now fully into performance mode. "This is my courtroom, and I say it's not allowed." "Contempt of court," he declared, gripping the gavel with a trembling conviction reserved for small men in tall chairs. Letitia scanned the room. T-shirt, king, untouched. Necklace lady, untouched. But her cross somehow had summoned the wrath of the judiciary. "I'm not disrupting anything," she said evenly. "I'm here to observe. Unless there's a rule on the books, your opinion isn't a statute." That got him. His smirk was slow, smug, and intellectually bankrupt. "A rule? I am the rule here. You disrespected this court the second you walked in with that." He slammed the gavel so hard it startled Mrs. Thompson out of her professional autopilot. Murmurs rose in waves. An older man in the back leaned over, whispering, "That necklace over there's bigger." Why is no one saying anything? Wilson, still silent, tilted his head further, just enough to say without speaking, "I've seen this before." Letitia stayed composed, but the strategy shifted. Direct argument wouldn't work on a man who thought due process meant doing whatever he pleased. "If I've broken a rule, I have the right to a clear explanation," she said, adjusting her phone like a witness preparing for deposition. Hargrove leaned back, face flush. "Here's your explanation. $500. Contempt of court." Bang. Final. Verdict. He said it with the pride of someone awarding himself for surviving his own insecurities. Gasps. Fingers paused over keyboards. "500, a woman whispered. The man in the T-shirt chuckled, then immediately choked it back when Hargrove shot him a look sharp enough to file a motion. "You'll pay today," Hargrove snapped. "Maybe that will teach you to respect order. This isn't a church, Miss James, nor a stage for your performance." Letitia looked straight at him. "Sir, I understand your ruling, but I have the right to ask, why aren't the others in this room with printed shirts and oversized necklaces fined too?" That landed. His face went red, his grip white. "Don't change the subject," he barked, as if the Constitution were a TED Talk he hadn't watched yet. "You're the only one bold enough to bring a religious symbol into my courtroom. That's the difference." Letitia didn't smile. She just nodded. Once. Quiet. Like someone who had just confirmed exactly what she came to find. And the courtroom, once again, held its breath. Because what was coming next would not be a defense. It would be a reckoning. Letitia James didn't blink. She didn't breathe harder. She didn't flinch. What she did was calculate. Hargrove had just fined her $500 for the grave sin of existing with a cross on her collar, while across the room sat a man who had apparently waltzed in straight from a gas station with a shirt declaring, "I am king," and no one said a damn word. This wasn't courtroom neutrality. It was performance art masquerading as jurisprudence, starring a judge who thought his gavel came with papal infallibility. Mrs. Thompson's fingers resumed typing, though now they trembled with the clatter of someone realizing they might be taking notes on a career-ending moment. 12 years under Hargrove's rule had taught her to keep her head down, but today her keyboard couldn't keep pace with what she was witnessing. James Wilson, arms crossed at the bench, didn't move, but the tilt of his head spoke volumes. He had seen bias before, but this was theatrical bigotry in a robe. Letitia stood still, her grip on the phone tighter now, not from fear, but strategy. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew this wasn't just about her fine. It was about his pattern. This was the kind of moment you didn't fight with outrage. You fought it with precision. "Are you done, sir?" she asked, soft, sharp, and loaded like a question you already knew the answer to. Hargrove blinked, caught off balance. "Not yet," he stammered. "You'll pay, and I'll move on with the session. Sit down." But Letitia didn't move an inch. Instead, she stepped forward, hand steady on the bench, eyes locked on him like a litigator tracking weakness in a hostile witness. "I'll pay," she said, "but we're not done here." Something shifted. The smug grin he'd worn like a badge cracked, barely, but visibly. Letitia's cross gleamed in the courtroom lights like it had heard enough nonsense for one day. "Did you hear me, Miss James?" $500. Payable today. Hargrove tried again to reclaim the stage, banging his gavel with the flair of a man who'd seen too many courtroom dramas and learned nothing from any of them. "Sit down. We have other business." Letitia inhaled slowly, and then she dropped it. The card. Not just a card. The card. Gold seal. White House embossing. Authority that didn't come from a bench but from the Constitution, and a president who knew exactly who he was sending into the lion's den. "Before I sit," she said, "I need to clarify a few things for the record." Hargrove leaned back, scoffing. "The record? You've got no right to demand anything here." But his voice cracked, because deep down even he could hear it, the sound of his own confidence leaking like air from a punctured tire. Letitia smiled. Barely. Not to gloat. Just the way a chess player smiles when the opponent realizes too late the king's already cornered. "I'm Letitia James, legal counsel and federal advisor under President Donald J. Trump," she said. "And what you don't seem to understand, Your Honor, is I don't just wear the badge. I understand the book." The room erupted, not in noise but in silence, so thick it rang. The "I am king" guy gaped like he'd seen an actual monarch. Miss Chandelier Necklace clutched her pearls, whispering to her lawyer. And Hargrove. He froze, one hand on the gavel, the other on thin air, like someone trying to grab dignity as it slipped out the back door. "That doesn't change the fact you broke my rules," he croaked. Letitia stepped forward, voice echoing like a verdict. "Your rules, or your bias. I'm here to observe a case about Christians banned from praying in a public park. This cross," she touched it lightly, "is my expression of that same faith, protected by the First Amendment. And what you've done today isn't enforcement. It's discrimination." Hargrove tried to push back. I don't need you teaching me the law. This is my courtroom. She cut in, sharper now. Wrong. This is the people's courtroom, and the law isn't a crown you wear. It's a leash you're bound to. Let me remind you of Church of Lukumi Babalu Aya vs. City of Hialeah, 1993. You can't ban religious symbols without just cause. So tell me, Judge, what exactly was your cause, or are we talking personal distaste dressed up in black robes? Dead silence. Not a shuffle, not a cough. Just a sea of faces and a whole lot of phones slowly, shamelessly lifting. Mrs. Thompson hovered over her keyboard, not sure whether to type or pray. James Wilson's expression shifted. Respect, clear and certain. Letitia wasn't done. You fined me $500 for contempt, but here's your problem. I brought evidence. That man, she turned slightly, pointing to Mr. I Am King, is out of dress code. Her. She nodded toward the bejeweled lawyer hugger. Is literally violating the decorum you claim to protect. But you said nothing. The only difference here is my cross. And with that, she let the silence hang. She didn't need a mic drop. She was the mic. Now all that remained was watching what a man like Hargrove would do when the room realized. He wasn't presiding anymore. He was being observed. Letitia James could have stopped. She had already done what most couldn't. Dismantle a federal judge's ego without raising her voice or moving a muscle. But stopping halfway through a demolition only leaves rubble. And Letitia wasn't in the business of leaving messes behind. She pointed again, calmly, at the woman adorned like a Mardi Gras chandelier. Her necklace blinds satellites, but you said nothing. My cross? That enraged you. That's not law, sir. That's bias on full display, powdered, robed, and mic'd. And there it was, the crack. Hargrove's face, once crimson with courtroom authority, drained to a shade last seen on powdered wigs in British museums. He trembled, stammered, attempted something vaguely resembling a rebuttal. You're slandering me, he said, sounding less like a judge and more like a substitute teacher who just lost control of the room. Letitia didn't blink. She lifted her phone, not to threaten, but to inform. Everything you've said since calling me up here has been recorded, she said, her tone flat and fatal. I've also forwarded a message to the White House legal team. This hearing isn't over. It's only changing jurisdictions. The room ignited, not in fire, but in friction. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "She's right." A clap broke out before being slapped down by a nervous James Wilson, but even he couldn't hide the hint of a smile forming in his jawline. Then came the backpedal. Predictable. Pathetic. "Miss, I can withdraw the fine," Hargrove sputtered, grasping for the air where his authority used to be. "No need to escalate this." His gavel fell again, this time not in command, but in surrender. But Letitia didn't give him the dignity of a bailout. She shook her head, firm as stone. "No, sir. That would make it worse. If you withdraw it now, not because you're right, but because you fear who I am, it only proves this court runs on fear, not fairness." She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. "I'm demanding a full audit of your rulings from the past 6 months, specifically every fine tied to religious expression, and I want this court to undergo mandatory First Amendment training, including you." Boom. Detonation. The older man in the back row shot to his feet. "That's right," he shouted, clapping like he just watched someone hit a grand slam in a courtroom built for bunts. A young woman beside him whispered, "Who is she?" Like she'd just seen Joan of Arc with better lighting. Mrs. Thompson's hands were shaking over the keyboard, like they were typing the Constitution's second coming. James Wilson stepped closer to the bench, not in defense of the judge, but of the moment. Judge Hargrove slumped, fingers on the gavel now trembling. He looked up at Letitia, not as a defendant, but as a reckoning. "You think I'm just a press figure?" she asked, voice soft, lethal. "I've spent years defending President Trump through election lawsuits, federal subpoenas, policy wars. I taught myself law to fight for others. Now I'm using it to fight for me, and for everyone you've silenced." She laid her White House credential gently on the bench. It might as well have been a verdict. Then she stepped back, eyes locked on him, not as a warning, but as a promise. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because what could he possibly say to someone who just turned his own courtroom into an exhibit of unconstitutional bias? The applause started as murmurs. Then hands clapped like dominoes. Mrs. Thompson typed faster than her fingers had ever moved. Wilson's arms uncrossed. He wasn't guarding the court anymore. He was bearing witness. Letitia stood, unshaken. The cross still glinted. Not a decoration, not a provocation. A declaration. Outside the courthouse, the sun threw gold over the marble steps. Letitia paused, checking her phone. A text already fired off to the White House. "Hargrove. Find me for the cross. Handled. Next steps needed." She hadn't even reached the sidewalk before her phone buzzed again. Cross in court was trending. First tweet. Judge finds Trump official for cross. She cites the Constitution and shuts him down. Video coming. 10 minutes later, hundreds of reposts, thousands of comments. Who is she? This woman's a legal ninja. Finally, someone fights back. And at 4 p.m., just as predicted, President Trump made it official. The tweet hit like a thunderclap. Letitia James, my legal warrior, just gave a leftist judge a lesson in the Constitution. Religious freedom will never be silenced under our watch. 50,000 shares in under an hour. The digital court of public opinion was now fully in session. And Judge Hargrove? Well, he was just Exhibit A. He didn't tweet it. He detonated it. From his personal account, President Trump fired off the line like it was a Patriot missile. Letitia James, my legal warrior, just taught a leftist judge a lesson on religious freedom. Legal genius. We won't let them suppress faith. Within 30 minutes, the post had racked up 50,000 retweets and climbed faster than any stock Biden's ever mispronounced. Conservative media went full throttle. Fox led with, "Trump legal advisor dismantles judge over cross," while others followed suit, salivating over every clip, quote, and screenshot they could get their hands on. Letitia's phone rang. "You did great," said the president's senior advisor, voice practically vibrating through the line. "The boss wants this everywhere. Prep your statement. We're going full offensive." Meanwhile, back in his chamber of faded wood and fading dignity, Judge Hargrove sat in the dark. Alone, silent, clutching a coffee mug colder than his remaining reputation. The calls wouldn't stop. Judicial counsel, the Post, even law school classmates who hadn't spoken to him since Watergate wanted a quote. He didn't answer. He didn't have one. His hand trembled not from caffeine, but from the unmistakable realization that he had just become a national punchline in a constitutional sitcom. "She's just a girl," he muttered, as if age were an exemption from being embarrassed by someone smarter, faster, and more legally literate. But even he knew he hadn't been hit by a girl. He'd been hit by a principle, a precedent, A woman carrying both the Constitution and a presidential mandate like twin blades. Across the building, Mrs. Thompson, who had spent 12 years decoding the cryptic ramblings and petty vendettas of this judicial relic, finally cracked. She picked up the phone and called a friend at a local paper. "I've worked for him long enough to know what I saw," she said, voice low but firm. "He always targets religious symbols, especially Christian ones." "That girl?" "She was right. I've got notes." She opened her drawer and pulled out a notebook, the quiet kind of documentation that takes down empires. Dozens of entries, crosses, hijabs, even a Sikh badge once. Fines, warnings. Meanwhile, T-shirts with F-bombs? No problem. Jewelry that could signal planes? Welcome to the bench. James Wilson, the bailiff, didn't stay silent either. In the courthouse break room, he dropped his lunch and dropped the truth. He fined people for religious stuff 20 times this year, he told his co-workers. Guy walks in with a vulgar shirt. He chuckles. You wear a cross, you get slapped. A clerk across the room nodded. What we all knew but wouldn't say. I'm calling the press. This needs to hit by 5. At exactly 4:07 p.m., Channel 7 News was already broadcasting live from the courthouse steps. The headline, "Trump legal advisor fined for wearing a cross, pushes back goes viral." Across town, the hashtags were stacking. Cross in court shot past 100,000 mentions in under an hour. A video surfaced, grainy but unmistakable, of Letitia holding up her White House card and citing Church of Lukumi Babalu Aye v. Hialeah like a SCOTUS seminar in real time. The city was ablaze. Supporters flooded X with their own horror stories. He fined me $200 for a prayer badge. He told me to remove my Star of David or face contempt. He told my daughter a rosary wasn't courtroom appropriate. And the footage kept spreading. Million views. 2 million. Letitia sat in her car, engine off, street quiet. She was watching the explosion in real time, her phone lighting up like Christmas in July. She called her husband, ever the calm one. "Honey," she said, half smiling, "I just shut down a judge." "It's going to get loud." He laughed on the other end. "You always do the impossible. Stay safe." She nodded, hung up, and opened her inbox. A message from Trump's chief legal advisor. "Press conference tonight. You're the headline. Make it count." Meanwhile, inside his house of cards, Judge Hargrove turned on the evening news. His face, red, sullen, caught mid-glare, was plastered across every screen. The caption read, "Judge faces fire after silencing Trump advisor over cross." He switched it off, but not before seeing the crawl at the bottom. D.C. Judicial Council demands explanation. By morning, his 30-year career would no longer be teetering. It would be begging for a lifeline. All because a woman walked into his courtroom with a silver cross and the full weight of the Constitution. At 7:59 a.m. the next day, the D.C. Judicial Council buzzed like a hive of wasps. Files spilled across tables. Names, dates, docket numbers, transcripts. In the center, Linda Martinez, 20-year veteran of federal investigations. "We've got 48 hours to report," she told her team, eyes scanning the files. "Everything tied to Hargrove and religious suppression. Pull it. Every ruling, every fine." Letitia, meanwhile, sat in her White House office, already on version 5 of her speech. Her inbox buzzed with praise, legal support, and requests for interviews. One message stood out. A law student had written, "You inspired me. I used to be afraid to challenge judges. Not anymore." Letitia exhaled. The press conference was in hours. The court had tried to fine her for her faith. Now she was finding them back, with the truth, and she wasn't done yet. Hargrove fined my mom for a cross once. The message blinked across Letitia's phone like a digital testimony, and it wasn't the only one. Within hours, hundreds poured in. Stories of fines, warnings, silenced prayers. Letitia read in silence, her expression unchanged, but inside she knew. This wasn't her fight anymore. It had metastasized. It now belonged to thousands. Back at the courthouse, Mrs. Thompson, former queen of the side-eye and quiet compliance, entered the investigation room like she was walking into her own confessional. Clutching a small, worn notebook like it was the Book of Revelation, she approached Linda Martinez. 12 years, she said, her voice tight but unwavering. I've tracked every time he did this. Crosses, hijabs, yarmulkes. If it had meaning, he made it a problem. But if it had rhinestones and profanity, that got a free pass. Linda flipped through the notebook, eyebrows climbing higher with every date and citation. September 14th, 2024. Man fined $300 for wearing a silver cross. October 20th, same year. Muslim woman fined $200 for her hijab being too visible. It read like a legal horror anthology with a robe-wearing villain. Linda snapped the notebook shut. This is gold. Thank you, James Wilson followed soon after, holding a handwritten statement like it was his final sermon. 15 years I've worked next to that man, he said, and I counted, on one day alone, 5 people fined for religious symbols. 3 others wore T-shirts that would make a sailor blush. He didn't say a word. Linda's team worked like bees with subpoenas. They compared transcripts, fines, and official court records. The data hit like a sledgehammer. 70% of religious symbol fines under Hargrove targeted Christians, and the penalty was twice as high as for other dress code violations. Meanwhile, Hargrove sat at home, staring into the bleak glow of a Zoom call with the Judicial Council. No robe, no smirk. Just a hunched man in a cardigan with a legal career bleeding out across the screen. I didn't mean to be biased, he muttered, like a drunk driver saying he thought he could make it. Linda didn't blink. Mr. Hargrove, our records show you fined Christians 80% more harshly than other violations. Can you explain that? Silence. Eyes down. Voice barely a breath. I thought I was maintaining order, he whispered, like a man realizing too late that law without self-awareness is just sanctioned arrogance. By noon, Linda's preliminary report was complete and devastating. This isn't just Hargrove, she told the council. 3 other judges showed patterns, but Hargrove is the crown jewel of unconstitutional bias. The council ordered his immediate suspension pending final review. The leak hit X like kerosene on flame. Cross in court surged again. Hargrove suspended. Letitia James shakes the system. One Maggie account posted, Trump's legal genius wins again. That's how you handle tyranny in a robe. At 6 p.m., Letitia stood in front of the mirror in the White House press briefing room. The cross still shone. The suit was crisp, but her eyes sharpened steel. Trump walked in, clapped her shoulder. You made me proud, Letitia, he said. Tonight we show them. Religious freedom isn't negotiable. She nodded and stepped to the podium. 1,000 flashes lit the room. Yesterday, I was fined for wearing a cross, not because I broke a rule, but because a judge believed his opinion outweighed the Constitution, she said. I fought back, not just for me, but for every person ever silenced for what they believe. The room crackled. Reporters fired questions. She answered with citations, rulings, statistics, not passion, proof. Meanwhile, across town, Hargrove watched the broadcast from his couch, hands trembling, colleagues disavowing him, reporters circling like hawks. But what broke him wasn't the tweets. It was Thompson's voice, Wilson's testimony, people he trusted who had finally decided to speak, not for revenge, but for justice. He opened his laptop and typed in, Church of Lukumi Babalu I verse City of Hialeah. The ruling stared back. She's right, he whispered. I was wrong. He picked up the phone, called the council. I'm resigning, he said, voice hoarse, but I want to help fix this. The next day he stood before a small committee, stripped of his robe, stripped of his armor. Letitia James opened my eyes, he said. I want to be part of the training so no one repeats my mistakes. Linda nodded. Redemption doesn't come cheap, but when offered honestly, it still counts. The story spread. Some mocked him. Too little, too late. Others offered rare credit. At least he admitted it. That's more than most. Letitia returned to her office. One last email pinged in from Linda. Hargrove resigned, volunteered to join the training. You changed him. She looked at her reflection, at the cross that started it all, and smiled. She came to observe one case. Instead, she exposed a culture, not just one judge, but a system. 4 days, one cross, and a courtroom that would never look the same again. Letitia James stood alone in her White House office, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the chaos of Pennsylvania Avenue below. The silver cross on her navy blazer didn't just glint, it commanded. 3 weeks ago, it was just a necklace. Now, it was a movement. Her phone lit up like a Christmas tree on Capitol Hill. Texts from Trump, from conservative leaders, from everyday Americans who finally felt someone had spoken for them. Amid the stream, a new message appeared, an official bulletin from the D.C. Judicial Council. Its subject line? Regulation passed. The email opened with 6 words. Thank you, Miss James. You were right. She smiled, not because she needed credit, but because the system had moved. Fast, furious, forced. The council's ruling was clear. No court in Washington, D.C. could ban religious symbols unless it could prove genuine and immediate disruption. And every court official, judges included, would now undergo mandatory First Amendment training. Linda Martinez had said it best during the council hearing. The Hargrove case didn't just expose a man. It exposed a mindset. Training is not a gesture. It's the baseline. The first plaque went up outside the courthouse. Simple. Stainless steel. It read, Religious freedom, a right beyond violation. Letitia saw the photo on X, where the Sagash cross in court still dominated trending topics. A new headline ran beneath it. D.C. changes law thanks to Letitia James. Meanwhile, inside that same courthouse, Charles Hargrove, no longer Judge Hargrove, stood at the podium of the training room. His voice was quieter now, stripped of arrogance, raspier with reality. I thought I was fair, he said, scanning the room. But I was wrong. Letitia James made me look in the mirror. Don't wait for someone to call you out. Check yourself before the system has to. Some nodded. Some still squirmed. On the front row, Mrs. Thompson took notes like gospel. Now appointed as head of court transparency, she was there not just to record, but to reform. Beside her, James Wilson trained new bailiffs, voice firm. We're the eyes and ears. If something's wrong, we speak, just like she did. Back in her office, Letitia slid the original $500 fine receipt into a sleek black frame. She didn't hang it to remember the punishment. She hung it because it marked the day the gavel cracked. And the people listened. Trump walked in, beaming, booming. "You're a star, Letitia. The religious freedom crowd loves you, and so do I." He laughed, patting her shoulder. "We just duddle you big. Keep the fire burning." She nodded, already prepping remarks for her next stop, a conservative rally in Virginia where over 5,000 were waiting. Texas, Florida, Ohio, governors were now publicly reviewing court policies. The Texas governor posted, "Letitia James reminded us what freedom looks like. Texas is next." A legal group in Florida submitted legislation titled the Cross Protection Act, citing number cross in court. On X, thousands shared photos of crosses, hijabs, yarmulkes, and Buddhist beads, all captioned the same way: "My freedom. No one can ban it." That night in Virginia, Letitia stepped onto a stage beneath a banner that read, "Faith is not a violation." Cameras flashed, flags waved. "That day," she said, voice rising, "I just wanted to observe a hearing, but when a judge fined me for my faith, I couldn't sit down, and I never will again." The crowd roared. Signs shot up. "Letitia for president." She smiled, not because she believed it, but because they did. Back in D.C., the system changed. Every fine was now logged, tagged, and reviewed monthly. Thompson ran audits. Wilson trained whistleblowers. Fear turned into vigilance. One night, Letitia received a short email from Linda Martinez. "You didn't just change Hargrove. You changed the culture. Thank you." Letitia looked up at the cross in the mirror. No longer a mere accessory. It had become a standard, a signal, a challenge. And it was working. At 9 p.m., her phone rang again. Trump. "You're my gold," he said. "The opposition's panicking. We're winning. Rest up, though. We've got more coming." She laughed. "Thank you, Mr. President. I'm ready." She touched the cross, then closed the blinds. 3 months later, the White House briefing room was packed. Cameras, clergy, reporters, TikTokers. Letitia stepped up, cross gleaming. 3 months ago," she began, "I was fined for my faith. I stood up, not just for me, but for all of you. Today, that courtroom has changed, and tomorrow, so will the next." Outside the D.C. courthouse, beneath the new plaque, people stood and took photos. Not of protest, but of progress. And Letitia James, once just a legal advisor in a Navy blazer, had become the face of a movement no robe could silence. Letitia James stood at the podium, voice echoing beneath the White House seal. "When a judge fined me for my faith, I didn't just stand up for myself. I stood up for everyone who's ever been told to hide what they believe. And today, we've changed the system." The applause rolled like thunder across the room. In the crowd, staffers, pastors, students, veterans, all holding signs reading number cross in court. Outside, the D.C. courthouse now bore a new plaque in its lobby. "Justice honors all faiths." It was no longer just a building. It was a lesson etched in steel. That night, in the quiet of her office, Letitia opened a handwritten letter from a law student in Ohio. "Miss James, I was scared to fight," it read. "But your cross case gave me courage. I'm launching a free clinic for people facing faith discrimination. Thank you." She read it once, then again. Before her mirror, she smiled, not for herself, but for whoever would be next. Across town, Charles Hargrove, former robe-wrapped tyrant, now a volunteer instructor, stood before a group of new court staffers. "I was wrong once," he told them, his voice steadier than expected. "Miss James taught me that justice has no room for bias, and neither do we." At the back of the room, Mrs. Thompson monitored audit logs like a watchdog with a conscience. James Wilson, meanwhile, drilled rookie bailiffs with a simple directive: If you see injustice, don't just record it, respond to it. That evening, Trump called. "You're my warrior," he told Letitia, "and don't stop. The country needs you more than ever." She nodded into the phone, standing on the White House balcony, watching D.C. settle beneath a sky streaked with gold and resolve. In her hand was the same silver cross, not just a keepsake, but a kindled flame. It had survived a courtroom gavel, outshone institutional arrogance, and now it gleamed over a city reshaped by one act of resistance. "Freedom doesn't come free," she whispered. "It takes fighters." Then came the message. "The Judicial Council requests you to chair a National Reform Commission." Letitia stared at the screen, then smiled. It was only the beginning. From a single afternoon in a second-rate courtroom, she had ignited something seismic, a nationwide conversation about faith, law, and power. The story of Judge finds Letitia James over a cross, only to discover she's a legal mastermind, now stood as a modern parable, not of outrage, but of order reclaimed. In 2025 America, where social media often moves faster than justice, and judges sometimes forget who they serve, this story wasn't an anomaly. It was a warning, a remedy, and a blueprint. It showed that the First Amendment isn't some dusty relic. It's a sword. And when wielded with law, courage, and truth, it can split systems wide open. Letitia didn't win with outrage. She won with evidence. She didn't scream. She cited. She didn't cancel. She confronted. And by rallying a nation, one post, one voice, one courtroom at a time, she proved something every American should remember. One person, one belief, one constitution. That's still enough to shake the world.